Hey everyone, it's Oliver here, and today I'm going to share a real-life experience I had that'll give you goosebumps. A few years ago, I moved into a new apartment in the city center. It was small, but perfect for me. The location was great, close to everything I needed, and the price was fair. At first, everything seemed calm and normal, and I was really happy with my new home. The first few months were pretty smooth. The change of scenery did me good, and I quickly adapted to the new reality. The apartment, despite being small, was cozy, and every nook and cranny seemed to welcome me. Mornings began with sunlight streaming in through the living room window, lighting up the space in a way that made me feel at home. I loved the sound of birds singing outside and the gentle hum of the city coming from the street. Gradually, I got to know my neighbors, and most of them were very friendly. There was a lady on the lower floor who always smiled and warmly greeted me when we crossed paths in the hallway. She had a small dog, a pug named Max, who became a constant and comforting presence on my walks around the building. Next door lived a young couple who always seemed to be in good spirits. They were expecting a baby, and we often exchanged a few words about the excitement and preparations for the new addition to the family. It was easy to feel like part of a small community there. The hallways were always clean, the caretaker did an excellent job, and the overall atmosphere of the building conveyed a sense of security and tranquility that I hadn't felt in a long time. At night, the building became incredibly quiet. I could hear the ticking of the clock on the wall and the occasional sound of footsteps coming from upstairs, but other than that, there was absolute peace. I cherished these moments of stillness to read a good book or watch a movie. Often, I would sit in my favorite armchair with a cup of tea and gaze out of the window. The lights from the buildings around twinkled like stars in the urban sky, creating a charming scene that calmed me and made me forget the stresses of the day. It was a simple yet enjoyable routine. I felt good in that place. The sense of peace was palpable, and with each passing day, it reinforced the idea that I had made the right choice in moving to that apartment. However, one night, something strange happened that still sends shivers down my spine just thinking about it. I woke up abruptly, shrouded in silent darkness, but there was something off. There was a faint, almost imperceptible sound coming from the living room. A rhythmic noise, as if something was moving back and forth. My heart began to race as I tried to discern what could be making that sound. I got out of bed cautiously, trying not to make any noise, and made my way to the bedroom door. Every step seemed to echo in the silence of the night, increasing my anxiety. When I finally reached the living room, my eyes still adjusting to the dim light, I saw the rocking chair. It was swaying gently, back and forth, as if an invisible presence was sitting there, rocking in a hypnotic and unsettling rhythm. I stood there for a moment, completely frozen, trying to make sense of what was happening. The scene was surreal, almost like I was trapped in a nightmare. 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind in a matter of seconds. My whole body tensed up, and I could feel cold sweat trickling down my back. I decided to approach slowly, trying to find some logical explanation. I closed all the windows and doors in the living room, making sure there was no draft that could be causing the movement. I touched the chair, hoping it would stop, but it continued rocking for a few more seconds before finally coming to a halt. The stillness that followed was even more unsettling, and the silence seemed to scream in my ears. I went back to bed, but sleep eluded me. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, trying to find a rational explanation for what I had just witnessed. Every little noise in the house seemed amplified, every shadow more sinister. The feeling of being watched consumed me, and I couldn't shake the image of the rocking chair moving on its own. What could have caused that? And, more importantly, would it happen again? The night passed slowly, and every minute felt like an eternity. When the first ray of sunlight finally streamed through the window, I felt a momentary relief, but the discomfort lingered. I got up, still shaken, and decided I needed to stay alert. Something wasn't right, and I needed to figure out what it was. In the following days, the phenomenon repeated itself, becoming increasingly frightening. Every night, without fail, I would wake up to that unmistakable sound, the soft, rhythmic creaking of the rocking chair. Each time I got up, heart pounding, and made my way to the living room, there it was, rocking on its own, as if an invisible someone were seated, swaying. It was a terrifying sight, sending chills down my spine. A sense of dread engulfed me with every step I took toward that eerie scene. However, the terror didn't stop there. As if the rocking chair moving on its own wasn't disturbing enough, other furniture began to act equally inexplicably. I would wake up in the dead of night to the sound of drawers opening slowly, the wooden creaking echoing through the silent house. At other times, I would hear the sharp, metallic sound of cabinet doors slamming shut with force, as if being manipulated by an invisible and furious presence. Each event heightened my discomfort and the feeling that something deeply wrong was happening in that apartment. I began to sense a constant presence, a feeling of being watched, even when I was alone. It was as if the air around me was imbued with a malevolent energy, something I couldn't see but could feel in every fiber of my being. At night, my mind was on high alert, and the slightest noise would startle me. I tried to find a rational explanation for what was happening, but nothing made sense. I thought of everything: drafts, building vibrations, even the possibility of imagining things. But the frequency and intensity of the events made me doubt my own sanity. Every time I closed a drawer or put a piece of furniture back in its place, it felt like I was participating in a macabre game, with an invisible and relentless opponent. My sense of discomfort began to morph into a deep and paralyzing fear. I started to avoid going to bed, fearing what might happen when darkness enveloped the apartment. I began sleeping with the lights on, but even that couldn't dispel the sense of imminent danger. Every shadow seemed to conceal something sinister, and every sound was a promise of terror. The tension reached an unbearable point. That's when I decided I needed to take concrete action to understand what was going on. That night, I made a decision that changed everything. I would record the living room during the night. After much thought about the best place to position the camera, I chose a strategic corner that could capture all the movement in the room. I set up the camera on a tripod, adjusted the angle carefully, and made sure it was working properly. The small screen glowed in the darkness, and I knew that would be my only chance to gather some solid evidence. That night, as I lay down, anxiety engulfed me. The room felt darker and colder than usual, and I could hardly shut my eyes. Every little noise made me jump, and my mind kept wondering what the camera might be capturing at that exact moment. The familiar ticking of the clock seemed louder, and my heart raced at the same accelerated pace, as if synchronized with my growing anxiety. Finally, after hours that seemed like an eternity, I fell asleep, though restlessly and disturbed. When the first ray of sunlight streamed through the window, I woke up abruptly, my heart still racing. I quickly got up and headed straight to the living room, feeling a mix of fear and excitement. I grabbed the camera with trembling hands, turned it off, and took it to the kitchen table. I sat down, took a sip of coffee to try to calm my nerves, and turned on the laptop. I connected the camera and started transferring the video. While the file loaded, each second felt like an eternity. With the footage finally open on the screen, I pressed play. The video showed my quiet living room. Everything seemed normal at first. The rocking chair was motionless, the furniture in place. Hours passed in a monotonous succession of darkness, until something started happening. The rocking chair began to move, exactly like on previous nights. My eyes were glued to the screen, and I could feel my heart beating hard in my chest. The chair continued its rhythmic movement, back and forth, as if an invisible someone were seated in it. Then, suddenly, the chair stopped moving. For a moment, everything was still, and the quietness in the recording was almost deafening. It was in that instant that something unexpected happened. A dark figure, an indistinct shadow, quickly passed by the camera. The image was blurry and too fast to identify any specific details, but the presence was undeniable. A humanoid shape, fleeting and ghostly, crossed the room in an instant, disappearing as quickly as it appeared. I was speechless. My heart felt like it was about to leap out of my chest, and a wave of dread washed over me. I watched the footage several times, trying to understand what that figure could be. With each replay, my fear only grew. There was no doubt that something or someone was there, something that defied all logic and reason. The idea that this figure could be wandering through my living room, while I slept just a few meters away, was simply terrifying. I decided I couldn't stay another minute in that apartment. The fear was paralyzing, and the feeling of being watched was unbearable. I needed to get out of there, leave everything behind. As I hastily packed my belongings, I felt a mix of relief and terror. With each item I placed in the suitcase, my desire to leave that apartment grew stronger. The shadowy figure captured on the footage lingered in my mind. Who or what could it be? This question echoed constantly, making any attempt to rationalize the situation impossible. The only certainty I had was that I needed to get out of there as soon as possible. The daylight, which once brought a sense of security, now seemed insufficient to dispel the fear that had settled within me. Every corner of the apartment seemed to hide dark secrets, every shadow seemed to move with a life of its own. Frenzied, I finished packing everything up, without looking back. I locked the door for the last time, feeling immediate relief as I left that place behind. As I drove away, I began to reflect on everything that had happened. Was the dark figure real or just a manifestation of my own fear? Could it have been a hallucination caused by stress and lack of sleep? Or perhaps something more sinister was at play? The unanswered questions continued to haunt me, but one thing was clear: I didn't want to uncover the truth. The unknown, as frightening as it was, seemed like a better alternative than facing whatever that presence might have been. In the days that followed, I tried to rebuild my life, but the impact of those events lingered with me. At night, sometimes I would still wake up suddenly, expecting to hear the familiar sound of the rocking chair, even though I was in a completely different place. The furniture in my new apartment seemed to behave normally, but my mind was far from at peace. I thought about sharing my story with friends or family, but something held me back. Perhaps it was the fear of not being believed, or simply the desire to forget it all. I decided to keep it to myself, a haunted memory that would serve as a warning. No matter how perfect a place may seem, sometimes it hides secrets that defy our understanding. So here I am, sharing this story with you. If you ever find yourself in a similar situation, my advice is simple: trust your instincts and don't ignore the signs. Sometimes, it's better not to seek answers to questions that may be better left unanswered. After all, there are things that perhaps we should never truly understand.